Welcome to the Coven Chat.
Thank you for joining me here at the Maiden Circle Coven Chat podcast, where we talk all things witchy, spiritual, and human.
Hello, Merry Meet, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here this week. In today's episode, we are discussing scrying, an ancient practice that was used on multiple continents across the world. In our last episode about mirrors, I mentioned scrying being one of the things that you can do with mirrors, but I didn't really go into the practice very much, so I thought we'd take that opportunity now. Of course, before we get into that and before we get to our fun fact of the day, I have a poem I'd like to share with you. It does seem like I'm having a little bit of trouble getting away from Greece. It's not necessarily intentional, but the interest I've had in Greek history, Greek culture, Greek mythology goes way back to my childhood. So I tried to get away from Greek mythology this week, and it led me to this poem, which just so happens to be on one of the most Greek websites I've looked at in a long time. I guess it makes some sense because I was looking up poems about divination and oracles. And of course, the most famous oracle is a Greek oracle, the Oracle of Delphi. So most of the poems that came up had to do with that oracle. There were a lot of good ones, but I really liked the sound of this one. I thought it was kind of fun, a little cheeky. And the website where it's linked is really interesting. It's for an organization called Onassis, a Greek organization in Athens, which focuses a lot on culture. If you're somehow listening to this from Athens, I recommend checking them out. They seem to have events on a regular basis, and they seem to focus on voices that can help enhance or better the world around them. They seem to want good things for everybody. So that'll be linked in the description. So I'm going to read a version of Nero's Deadline by Constantine P. Kathavi. The translation that I'm reading isn't the same as the one linked on the website, but I do think the website is the best resource. I just like the sound of this translation better. This translation is by Ian Parks. Nero shrugged his shoulders when he heard the future that Apollo prophesied. Beware the age of 73, the oracle at Delphi never lied. He took her at her word. Untroubled, he slept on secure. At 30 he could dedicate his life to pleasure pure and simple, unperturbed, the deadline more than 40 years away. Jaded, he limps back to Rome, hungover from his trip to Greece, transformed, translated by excess, the actors, races, stadiums, flowing wine, Achaean cities sloping to the shore with naked bodies lolling on the beach, stars reflected in the purple sea. So Nero dreams. And meanwhile, on the arid flats of Spain, Galba drills his legions secretly. Galba, a sprightly 73. I do hope you enjoyed that. Let's move on to our fun fact of the day.
Pagan fun fact. Here's your fun facts now.
I like trying to find new ways to connect these episodes so there's some coherence throughout the run of this podcast. And since last week's episode is mirrors, it made sense that this week's episode be scrying, something you can do with mirrors. One of the oldest tools used for scrying is a black mirror, an obsidian mirror to be exact. So for today's fun fact, I wanted to talk about obsidian. As I'm speaking to you, I'm holding an obsidian egg in my hand. I've mentioned it before, it lives on my altar, and I've probably referred to it as a stone. But it isn't actually a stone. Obsidian is glass. It's made of cooled lava, essentially, but it has properties similar to stone, and so it can actually be used in the same ways that stone can be used. According to rockseeker.com, obsidian was used in ancient trading and used to make tools. Like flint, it can be used to make knives and other types of tools. And because of its non-crystalline structure, it can be made into a super thin edge, making it an extremely sharp weapon. The obsidian egg I'm holding now is black, and most of the obsidian I've seen is black, but obsidian also comes in different colors. It can be seen as red, brown, white. It can be spotted. It can have stripes or striations. It just depends on what minerals and air bubbles and other things are deposited into the obsidian as it's forming. According to almanacsupply.com, obsidian is connected with the root chakra. That's the chakra at the base of the spine. It's often represented by a red color. Obsidian is an extremely grounding stone, or glass as it is. Obsidian is said to block and or absorb negative energies, so it's also used for protection. That's essentially why I got it and what I was using it for on my altar. Since getting it, I've also used it often for grounding and meditation. Because of the way obsidian forms, it doesn't have a crystalline structure, which is what gives it its smooth, shiny surface. It can be shaped many different ways, and of course one of those ways is the mirror. So let's go ahead and discuss scrying using obsidian mirrors and other tools. If you don't have one, I definitely recommend you get yourself some obsidian, whatever shape works for you. I like the egg a lot. It's also just very comfortable to hold in my hand. I've been holding it this whole time, switching it from hand to hand, and it just feels really good. And it also has me feeling very grounded and very solid. Sometimes when I come here, I feel kind of flitty. I feel nervous. I feel a bit worried. I'm thinking, who's going to want to listen to this? Who's going to be interested in the things that I have to say? And holding on to this non-stone, I haven't really felt any of that. I've just felt like saying whatever it is needs to be said. Hopefully you got some value out of this fun fact. Let's move on to this episode's musing. So, scrying. Scrying is the practice of divination through gazing. It's usually done with a reflective surface, but there's also scrying using smoke, candle wax, tea leaves, and a variety of other methods. The messages that come through from scrying are largely dependent on the person who's doing the scrying. This is because those messages are interpretations of what that person is seeing. So just as with tarot, the psychology of the seer is relevant. One of the oldest known methods of scrying is to use a dark or black bowl filled with water. The scryer would gaze into the water or reflective surface, clearing their mind, finding themselves in a meditative trance state. Then they would record or speak whatever it is they see in the surface, whatever visions, visuals, sometimes even words or other thoughts can be relevant to a scrying session. According to fieldsofstudy.com, scrying comes from an Old English word, descry, meaning to make out dimly or to reveal. And that's essentially why we do it, to reveal something, to show us a truth, to show us the likely outcome of a path we're already on. And according to the College of Psychics, scrying can also be used to find missing items, something I never knew. Excuse me, that's the College of Psychic Studies. According to the college, it's recommended if you want to start scrying to practice in the evening after 10 p.m. when the moon is high. It's also recommended that you practice in a dark room using a small source of light, usually a candle, but of course take safety measures if you choose to do that. It's 2023, so you can also use a flicker candle, one of those battery operated candles, or a tiny flashlight or a covered up lamp, but something that only gives off a small dim light. That's of course if you're using the mirror method, that's using a obsidian mirror or even just a regular mirror. My first attempt at scrying, I used a regular mirror that I still have and still only use for magical works. I was in my bedroom, a dark little room I had, and I had a candle at the time. I light candles pretty frequently now anyway. I usually get those 100 pack tea lights. So I probably had one of those or a little chime candle, which you can get on Amazon. And I sat in the dark gazing at this mirror. And I just opened myself to whatever was to come. This was around late 2013, early 2014. I had just moved to New York. I was going to school and working, and I just wanted to know where my path might lead. So I gazed in the mirror, and as I did, I saw myself. I saw the silhouette of myself as I was at that time. And then I saw myself sort of bald with no hair. And then I saw the hair on my head start to grow. But it didn't grow like I was used to it growing. It started to grow out and up. From the time I was around 5 years old until summer of 2014, I'd had my hair chemically straightened. My mom started doing it, then she hired people to do it, and then I continued doing it when I lived on my own. I had never seen or even thought to see myself with natural hair, but that's what I was seeing in the mirror. I remember afterwards I drew a picture of it, just a little face and this big curly fro filling up the rest of the frame. I didn't think it was something that was going to happen anytime soon. I thought, oh, that could be me 10 years off, 20 years off when I'm in my 40s and established and this spiritual person who's doing things, after I'm done with acting school, when I've established myself and I've started a business and I've done all this other stuff. That could be me. Later that year, I lost my job. I wasn't doing very well in school. I wasn't attending very well. I wasn't able to stay awake because of my sleep schedule and because I hadn't had a grasp on self-discipline at that time. It's something I still struggle with, but it was definitely not great at that time. And financially, I was barely staying afloat. So there were things I had to cut out. And one of those things were the relaxers, the chemical hair straighteners. I just couldn't buy it anymore. I just couldn't be arsed. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the desire. And I didn't have the funds. So I accidentally started going natural. And I started trying to figure out what to do with the hair that was growing out of my head in a way that I had never experienced, not since before I could remember. A year or two later, I'm looking at pictures of myself and I find that picture that I drew from the Scrying, and I see my hair is just like that now. I mean, now, as I'm speaking to you, I keep it in braids most of the time. When it's out of braids, it's this big fluffy thing, and I love it. I love the texture. I love when I'm washing my hair, the little curls and how it springs back into tiny curls, because with braids it's a bit longer, a bit stretched out. I could never imagine going back to the relaxers. And I always think it's just kind of crazy how I looked in that mirror with my straight, relaxed hair that was flat against my head and crunchy and damaged, and saw this thing that I never imagined I would do, because when I was growing up, natural hair just wasn't the thing. It wasn't attractive. It wasn't desired where I was. So it's kind of crazy that I saw that in this mirror. I saw that that was my path. All those other things that I thought when I was looking at it, oh, that's me when I've started a business. That's me when I've established myself more spiritually. That's me when I'm this more spiritually intelligent person, when I'm done with acting school. All of that was also true. It just happened faster than I thought. I started Maiden Circle the next year or later that year. I think it was actually later that year. I'm also more spiritually solid than I was at that time. I have a lot more trust in myself and my intuition, and my faith is probably even stronger. It's always been very strong, but it's probably even stronger now than it was at that time. And all of those things I said, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, that's who I'll be. But it actually started right there when I was doing that scrying. And then tangible steps were taken later that year, albeit not by choice, not consciously, but tangible steps to becoming that image that I saw that came from somewhere beyond me. One could say what I visualized informed my actions. But then, as I said, it wasn't conscious. I simply couldn't afford to straighten my hair, didn't have the time, didn't have the energy, and so I adapted. That was my first experience with scrying. Since then, I have gotten a lot more in touch with my intuition, as I've said, and I've branched out, as you all know, into divination with cards. Card divination is my go-to method now, but once in a blue moon, I will still pull out the mirror and gaze into it, and occasionally I find myself gazing into this egg, this obsidian egg, just to see what comes through. I haven't had any experiences as profound as that first experience, not with scrying, but I still find it to be a very special meditative practice. There's something extremely calming about sitting in the dark, gazing at a reflective surface, and letting your mind take flight. Whether you see it as a way to tell the future or a magical peephole into the mind and motives of another, whether you see it as simply a way to reflect on yourself and bring whatever is inside of your psyche out, scrying can be a very useful and enjoyable tool for any witchy toolbox. And as I've said, there are many different methods to do it. The ones I've described, the sitting in the dark room, using a candle, reflective surface, that's just one way to do it. I encourage you to look into scrying if it's something that catches your fancy. Get yourself some obsidian, sit down, have a gander. See what comes up, write it down, and then write me and tell me about it. That's all I have for now. Let's move on to our divination of the day. I will be using cards. In today's reading, I'm going to be using the Soul Healing Oracle and clarifying, if necessary, with the Gilded Tarot. We have number 4, Soul Messages, messages from your ancestors, higher knowing, messages from the divine. We have number 33, Battle Cry, summoning strength, stand up for yourself, prepare for battle. On the bottom of the deck, we have the Woman, number 39. Feminine energy, mature, nurturing. I'm going to go ahead and pull some clarifiers. We have the Queen of Wands, we have the Three of Cups, we have the Hierophant, and on the bottom of the deck we have the Nine of Swords. The first thing I notice are the numbers. We have 43339. We also have Three of Cups and Nine of Swords, so 3s and 9s are probably going to be significant. 3s tend to represent divinity. We have, the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost. We have the Mother, Maiden, Crone, the Father, the Warrior, Sage. So 3 tends to represent divinity. It's a magic number, as they say. 9 represents the end of a cycle. It's also 3 tripled, so it's a lot of 3 energy here. This is a very divine, very important message. The next thing I notice is that there is a very strong feminine energy over this reading. Every card that has a person on it, except for the Hierophant, has women on it. We also, of course, have the Woman, but Battle Cry has a female warrior on it. The Queen of Wands, she is also a passionate, sometimes warrior-like figure. She is ready to fight if needed. The way she holds her wand in front of her, she holds it at the ready. If she needs to strike, she can, but she doesn't have to. She almost looks relaxed. She almost looks as if she's just kind of chill. But it wouldn't take much for that wand to become a weapon in her hands. And going further with the weapons, with Nine of Swords and Battle Cry, the warrior is holding a blade, and of course Nine of Swords, she's blocked in by blades. The blade, of course, represents communication. It can represent a sharp tongue, it can represent war or aggression, but very often it represents the air element, which tends to mean communication, creativity. I'm leaning towards communication because we do have soul messages here. And with the Three of Cups, this message is going to be very exciting. It's going to be big. It's going to feel dangerous almost. It's going to feel like something overwhelming. It's going to feel very big. But because we have this Three of Cups, I don't think it's going to be something bad. I actually think this is going to be a positive message. It's not something you've experienced before, so you might feel overwhelmed, you might feel anxious about it, you might feel a bit underprepared. But with the Queen of Wands and the Hierophant here, you're not underprepared. That's just that Nine of Swords anxiety. You're definitely ready for whatever this is. It is going to be a surprise. It doesn't have to be a woman, just an older person or someone who's more mature and nurturing. Someone you feel you could learn from. This message that's coming in, it's going to require strength. It's going to require you to be in touch with your inner Queen of Wands, with that passionate, ready to strike side. But I think your biggest enemy is going to be yourself. It's going to be the voice in your head telling you no, telling you you don't deserve this, or making you want to run away. You have to avoid self-sabotage, put your faith in something higher than yourself, and trust that this message is for your highest good, despite what that anxiety brain tells you. And even if the message doesn't appear great on the surface, it's leading you to your highest good. So of course, again, you have to be strong through it, and you have to push through the mental blocks. But ultimately, I do think this is a positive message, and you'll be receiving a very positive message sometime in the next 7 days, whenever you're listening to this. So I wish you all the best with that, and I wish you a wonderful week. Thank you so much for being here. Again, I implore you to get yourself some obsidian, try some scrying, try some tarot, try some divination, and just see what comes up and see where it takes you. Sit in the dark, look in the mirror, and don't worry about whether it makes you seem a little strange. With that, I thank you for being here. I send you 1,000 blessings and all the love in the world. Bye now.